Syracuse's over-under win total is out on FanDuel. It's low, but I understand it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we're going to talk about FanDuel's over-under projection for Syracuse football in 2025. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually see it to the right of you on today's show. If you're just listening to this, that's okay. I'll tell you what it is right now. FanDuel's over-under for Syracuse football's wins in 2025, just the regular season, it does not account for postseason play, is 5.5 wins. And on this show, I'm going to talk about whether or not that's disrespectful to Syracuse football. We're also going to talk about the range of outcomes and the goal for the Orange in 2025. All right. So it's 5.5 wins, minus 110 odds in either direction. And for those that are not necessarily betting experts, that's okay. That simply means you would have to bet $110 to make $100 in profit. That is pretty standard. Basically, FanDuel is saying that it is a coin flip as to whether or not Syracuse football is going to be a bowl team in 2025. Keep in mind, the Orange are coming off a 9-3 regular season in 2024. So, is 5.5 over-under disrespectful? I would say that it's motivation for sure. It's definitely bulletin board material for Syracuse football that they can use, that they're being doubted by the folks in the desert. But I do not think that this is a disrespectful total. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below your thoughts on Syracuse football's over-under 5.5 wins in 2025. I have no problem calling out predictions about whatever it is related to Syracuse sports that I feel are disrespectful. I mean, if you recall, it was last April when we had CF Budge on the podcast when he was trying to defend his ranking of Kyle McCord being the 11th best quarterback in the ACC in the preseason, and that Fran Brown was the 14th most impactful coach in the conference. And we all know that CF Budge ended up turning out wrong, and I called him out for that in the preseason. But in regards to 5.5 wins, I understand it, despite the fact that it's a little low. I would take the over. However, that's just my opinion on that. I'd actually argue that FanDuel is putting a little bit of respect on Fran Brown and this coaching staff. Because when you take everything into account, we're going to talk about it all here on this podcast, the schedule, the quarterback play, the fact that it's really inexperienced, the youth on the roster for this upcoming season. Think of it this way. If Dino Babers was the head coach of Syracuse football right now, what do you think Syracuse football's over-under would be for 2025? What do you think? We're just chatting here. We're just spitballing. 3.5 wins, maybe 4.5 wins. I actually think FanDuel's placing a decent amount of respect on this coaching staff. The fact that they have it at 5.5 and basically a coin flip to be a bowl team in 2025. But let's get to one of the reasons why 5.5 is low, but it's appropriate. Let's talk about the schedule. Syracuse football is set to face 4 teams that made the college football playoff in 2024. They got Tennessee, neutral site in Atlanta to open up the regular season. Now, that's going to be a fun one. That's a fun way to start the regular season, right? You also got at Clemson, who won the conference last year. You got at SMU, the regular season conference champion. And at Notre Dame, the team that, I don't know, they only went to the national title game and lost to a better team in Ohio State, but they're still pretty darn good. And on top of those games, if you look at their road opponents, they also have to go to Miami and to Georgia Tech, 2 teams that are also supposed to be pretty good as well in 2025. What makes it really hard is that those games I just mentioned are all away from the Dome. Right? There's no dome field advantage. There's no home field advantage. You're either playing a neutral site in Atlanta against Tennessee, or you're playing a true road game. That makes it tougher for Syracuse football to win those games. And I want to credit Noon's Magician for this fact that I'm about to give you guys, okay? All of Syracuse's road or neutral site opponents in 2025 have a projected win total between 7.5 and 10.5 regular season wins. The quote unquote worst opponent, right? Again, air quotes for worst, is Georgia Tech at 7.5. And the quote unquote best, again, air quotes, is Notre Dame at 10.5 wins. The good news for Syracuse football and their schedule is that their home ACC games are a little less challenging, at least on paper. It's Duke, Pitt, UNC on Halloween, and Boston College. All of those teams have an over-under of less than 6.5, or I should say less than or equal to 6.5 wins in 2025. What are the other home games, you may ask? Well, one of them is against Colgate. That's your free win right there. And the other one is UConn. You should be able to beat UConn, but I also would like to point out that UConn actually had its best regular season since 2010 a year ago. They went 8-4, and in 2010, they also went 8-4. So if they can build off last season's success, I wouldn't say that UConn is a cupcake game necessarily for Syracuse football. It's definitely one of the easier ones on paper, but I wouldn't say it's a slam dunk, no doubt win like it used to be when you were facing the UConn Huskies back when they were a 1 or 2 win team for many years. But they seem to be a little bit better with Jim Mora at the helm. And they actually went to the Dome last year, and Syracuse football controlled that game from start to finish. I don't believe that the final score is a good indicator of how much Syracuse dominated UConn, but it was a one-possession game. That's fact. It was a one-possession game when UConn went to Syracuse. Having said that, UConn, Colgate as home, out-of-conference games, it's really difficult to get much easier than that, at least on paper. And then the ACC home games, again, are Duke, Pitt, UNC, and Boston College. So there is definitely an avenue where Syracuse doesn't win a single road game, but they still manage to go 6-6, which would be enough to make a bowl. I would love to hear from you in the comments section below, your thoughts on Syracuse's schedule, as well as whether or not you think that Syracuse football will go over or under 5.5 regular season wins in 2025. And do you think it's disrespectful that the Orange are only at 5.5? Do you think they should be much higher? I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. Now, there's another reason why Syracuse football has a projected win total of only 5.5 on FanDuel, and that's because they have a wide range of outcomes for next season. So we're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Syracuse. Attention, Locked On Syracuse fans, the future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. Now with Roy, you get to be a part of the change and support Syracuse athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, receive exclusive content from the athletes you back, and the best part is, you ready for this one? If your player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. So, for example, if you want to donate to JJ Starling, you want him to stay for Syracuse basketball in 2025-26, but he decides to enter the portal for some reason, well, guess what? You're going to get your money back even though you donated to JJ Starling because he entered the portal. The Roy app is giving fans control, no more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team in the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Syracuse athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. This is Locked On Syracuse. And folks, if you enjoy this podcast, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps the channel grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Plus, it's completely free and it allows the channel to show up directly on your feed. Now let's get back to talking about Syracuse football's over-under for 2025 in terms of regular season wins, which is at 5.5. Earlier, we talked about whether or not it's disrespectful. I think it's low, but in reality, it's appropriate. Another reason why I think it's appropriate, besides from the schedule, which you just talked about, is the wide range of outcomes for Syracuse football in 2025. I believe that the best way to make a prediction about a team heading into a season, because predictions are tough. They are really, really challenging, right? We think we know something and then something else occurs, right? We bank on this player being good and maybe that player gets hurt. You never quite know. So the best way to do it is to think of a range of outcomes, best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, and then you just meet in the middle. You split the difference, and that is my way, at least, of coming up with a win prediction. So for this season, I believe that they have a range of anywhere between 9 regular season wins on the high end. And unfortunately, I could see the worst case scenario where this team completely bottoms out and they only win 3 games in the regular season. So you take 9, you take 3, you add them together, you get 12, you divide by 2, you get 6 wins. So I guess that's my prediction. 6 wins in the regular season, which is why I'm picking over 5.5. For context, last year, I thought that Syracuse football in the regular season would win anywhere between 6 and 10 games in the regular season. So I split the difference. I said 8 regular season wins. They ended up winning 9 regular season wins. So they were a little bit above my projection. That's how I like to do it. But judging by what I just told you all, the range of outcomes for Syracuse football this upcoming season is a lot wider than it was a year ago. And why is this the case? Why is the range so wide for the Orange in 2025, you may be asking yourself? Well, number one, you got an inexperienced quarterback. Nobody has a clue how these quarterbacks are going to perform in real, live college football game action. You want to know how I know that? Because none of the guys in the current quarterback competition have ever made a start in college. In fact, Rickie Collins, the LSU transfer that Syracuse brought in this offseason, he's the projected starter. I think he will earn the job. He leads all the quarterbacks that are going to be fighting for it for quarterback one. He leads all of them in career pass attempts. How many pass attempts do you think Rickie Collins has? Or at least he had at LSU, which is his career, 2 years. 7. That's it. Rickie Collins is the leader. He is the most experienced. He has 7 career pass attempts in college football. And for what it's worth, he actually completed all 7 passes. So he is a perfect 7 for 7. The other quarterbacks in the competition are true freshmen like Luke Carney and Rich Bellin. You got a redshirt freshman in Jakari Williams, and you also got a senior in Michael Johnson Jr., who was the backup to Kyle McCord last season, and he only threw a couple of passes in the win over Holy Cross, the only time where he actually saw game action. Now, look, if Syracuse football next season, if they get quality quarterback play or elite quarterback play, then Syracuse football could have a very good win total in 2025. That's where you get to the upper end of the range of outcomes, right? That's when you can start seeing 8-9 wins, right? But if Syracuse gets rough quarterback play, well, that's when you could start seeing, they might not make a bowl game, right? So I guess we're hoping that we can get a read on these quarterbacks in the spring game. I mean, I'm hoping that they make it public, that you can actually watch the game, attend the game in person if you would like to. I know that there's a lot of colleges around the country that are either A, canceling their spring games outright, or B, not making it open to the public. I'm hoping that Syracuse doesn't do that for selfish reasons. I think we all want to see Syracuse football back in action during the spring, but you never know, right? I think their spring game, according to O'Lally Foundation, is on April 12th. I haven't seen anything saying that they're going to cancel it or not make it open to the public, but it's something we have to monitor because a lot of colleges are doing it. Point is, hopefully we can get a read on the quarterbacks during the spring game action, right? Because then we can have a better idea of, are we going to get quality quarterback play or are we not going to get quarterback play, or good quarterback play, I should say. High quality quarterback play. You get what I'm saying, all right? So that's number one. That's number one, why they have a wide range of outcomes, which contributes to a 5.5 over-under win total. You don't have an experienced quarterback there. You don't have Cade Klubnik like a Clemson does, who you can pretty much bank in a good number of wins for Clemson because Cade Klubnik's good, and you know he's good. We don't know who on Syracuse's roster is good. We just don't. And that leads me really to point number 2 here. There's just more youth on the roster in general. If you think about the key veteran starters from last year that are gone, I just wrote down a list of names when I was prepping this podcast, and there could be guys that I'm leaving out on that are leaving out that are obvious names that off the top of my head I just didn't think of. So I apologize, but here we go. Kyle McCord, LaQuinn Allen, Aronde Gadsden, Jackson Meeks, Savion Washington, John Ray Reed, Marlo Wax, Elijah Clark, Justin Barron, Clarence Lewis, Fidel Diggs. They're all gone. They are not with Syracuse football anymore. And those were all veteran starters just a year ago. And Syracuse, on top of that, in terms of replacing those guys, well, they were limited in the portal. They didn't take many guys, at least in the fall portal window. Maybe they take 1 or 2, maybe 3 more guys in the spring portal window. But really, they led the nation in 35 high school commits. So they were a little bit limited in the portal this year. And hopefully, by the way, they can make it 36 high school commits if they can get 4-star corner Javari Flowers to commit to Syracuse football, although that's going to be a steep battle with Miami and Georgia. So with the young players, right? Is Daryl Gill going to take another step this season? Is Yassine Willis going to fill the void of LaQuinn Allen, maybe in tandem also with Will Nixon, a veteran from Washington, that Washington transfer who got hurt a year ago with a Liz Frank injury? Can they fill the void of Jackson Meeks, LaQuinn Allen, right? Can Emmanuel Ross, a 4-star receiver in 2024, can he break out? How about Jamie Tremble, a 4-star tight end in 2024? Can he fill the void of Aronde Gadsden? I think he can, but it's certainly a question. How about the youth on the defensive line? You got King Joseph Edwards, you got David O, right? Can those guys take a jump forward and maybe become starters or at least high-impact players in the rotation? That'd be nice. How about the youth in the secondary? You got Davian Kerr, Ivan McDaniels, Demetrius Samuel Jr., a true freshman 4-star recruit. Can those guys see key playing time in 2025 and not just see key playing time, but actually have success with some playing time? Also, the true freshmen, you took 35 of them. How many are going to play this upcoming year? And who's going to be good out of that bunch right off the bat? We saw Murad Watson be a true freshman All-American on the defensive line for Syracuse football. He seems like he's going to be a foundational piece. Yassine Willis had a role last year. How about Malachi James? I mean, he's a 2024 guy, but he's a sleeper as well. I mean, he's a special teams guy. Maybe he becomes a starting running back. I don't know. The point being is that the more youth on the roster that breaks out and has success in 2025, the better that Syracuse football is going to be. And it works the other way around. If they don't get a lot of contributions from their young guys this upcoming season, how good is Syracuse realistically going to be? If you compare it to last year, most of their key contributors were veterans. And this upcoming year can be entirely different. So you got a tough schedule. You got inexperienced quarterback play. You got more youth on the roster in general, which will definitely help you long term, but it doesn't necessarily help you as much in 2025. That's why Syracuse football's over-under win total on FanDuel is, while low, and I would certainly take it over by a smidge, It's appropriate in my mind. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below because I'd love to hear from you. If you think I'm being totally ridiculous and you're a super optimistic person and you think that Syracuse football is going to win 10 games in 2025, I want to hear from you. Please explain to me. I'm open. I'm open to it. Why do you think that Syracuse football is going to have a truly successful year? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below because coming up, we'll talk about the goal for Syracuse in 2025. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. You can get $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day, so protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts, so to help you plan for your child's future, right? Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jackson Holzer, and we're going over Syracuse football's FanDuel over-under win total for 2025, which is at 5.5 regular season wins. We talked about why that is the case. I do not believe it is disrespectful. Don't worry, I have no problem calling out publications or predictions that I think are ridiculous. I do not think this is ridiculous. I understand it, and I explained throughout the podcast why I understand the over-under only being at 5.5. Having said that, let's talk about the goal of 2025. What do you think it should be the goal for the Orange in 2025? Well, I'll be Captain Obvious for a moment, right? We can be Captain Obvious just for like a moment here. The goal is to win the national championship game. That's literally every program's goal. Win the national championship in 2025. Well, sorry, folks. I hate to disappoint. I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but Syracuse football is not going to win the 2025 national championship. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. But guess what? I'll be happily wrong if that is the case. Now, maybe someday Syracuse can get to the national championship level, but they are not yet. The time is not now. So let's get that Captain Obvious out of the way. I think the goal for this upcoming season is to get as many young players on the roster to take a big step forward in their development. Meaning, I would love to see a ton of young players in the starting lineup playing meaningful snaps during the regular season and hopefully in a bowl game as well. Because if Syracuse football, let's say, goes 6-6 this upcoming season with that schedule and the inexperience at quarterback play, but most of the major contributors are young players around said quarterback, I think we'd all be pretty bummed with 6-6, even though that is a bowl appearance, right? You always want to be better than that. But if they're all young, that sets you up really well for 2026 and beyond. That means they've gained experience and probably have also gotten better. However, if they go 6-6 this upcoming year and most of their key contributors are veterans, guys who have been on the roster already for a long time, that's not a really good sign. It's not. You would rather see as many young players as possible take a significant step forward in 2025. Of course, it would also be ideal if the quarterback who starts in 2025 plays well enough to also be the quarterback in 2026. Aside from Michael Johnson, all of the quarterbacks in the quarterback competition have eligibility beyond just 2025. So hopefully Syracuse football this upcoming year has more clarity on who their quarterback is going to be for the foreseeable future. And it also allows them to not have to go into the transfer portal again to get a quarterback. So overall, I think that's a fair goal for Syracuse football in 2025. They do have a tough schedule. They do have a wide range of outcomes. There's a lot of youth on the roster. They have inexperience at quarterback play. If you can get as many young players on this team as possible to take a significant step forward, we mentioned a ton of the players in the previous segment, right? Jamie Tremble and King Joseph Edwards and Davian Kerr got a lot of snaps at the end of last season. Can he play even better this upcoming season at corner? I think if Syracuse can do that, it would be a relatively successful year. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below your thoughts on what would make a successful season for the Orange in 2025. As far as what is coming up on the podcast in the future, tomorrow we're going to talk about basketball again. We got Poll Friday. We are going to grade Syracuse basketball's transfer portal haul that they got from last offseason. Eddie Lampkin, Jair Davis, Jaquan Carlos, and Lucas Taylor. Also coming up on the podcast in the future, Saturday, Syracuse basketball is back in action. They are on the road at Virginia Tech. They are playing at noon Eastern, and there will be a full post-game reaction podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, check out the Locked On College Basketball Podcast with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. Don't wait for March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And I will see you all again soon.